All right, perfect. How is everybody doing? I think I'm going to go ahead and give a few minutes for people to sort of trickle in. So, what I want to talk today about is geolocation and maps in NativeScript. And so I've got a few different things I sort of want to cover. And just to give you some sort of context for why I'm covering this topic and caring about it is I'm going to be a part of DevReach. So if you're not familiar with DevReach, I should bring that up. DevReach is a conference we do at Progress every year in Sofia, Bulgaria. And my talk this year, if I can find myself, the agenda is about some really 10 awesome things you can do with NativeScript, which is really my sort of attempt to bring a clickbait from the blog posting world into the conference world. And so basically, I just want to give people a really quick overview of some of the really cool things that you can do with NativeScript. So it's sort of a whirlwind tour, just trying to quickly show a handful of things. And so I've got this demo app over here that I've started where I've got some of these features in place already. Like I've got some interesting animations I've been playing with. I've got one set up where I've got Face ID set up in this login screen, an AppSync example. I'm going through and setting a few of these things up. And one example I haven't sort of worked on and built is working with geolocation and maps. And I like to cover this topic just because I think it's one of the more pragmatic APIs we have in NativeScript. When people ask things like, what sort of things should I build with NativeScript? I guess more specifically, why should I build a native app versus building just a web application? And one of the answers I give all the time is that you can build better maps. Maps are a common thing in a lot of applications, biometric auth. A lot of these things I want to show are reasons why it's really worth it to build an iOS and Android app. And so we'll do maps. And to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure what I want to build here. This is for a conference demo. So I want this to be pragmatic. I want this to be something that's sort of a useful thing that people could actually look at and say, hey, I need this sort of thing. Let me actually dive into the code and see it. But for conference talks, I also want my demos to be a little bit of fun too. So the best demos have a pragmatic, sort of practical angle to them, and then also sort of a zany angle that's just a little bit nuts. And so we'll try to do a little bit of both. And like I said, I don't really have much of a plan for exactly what sort of mapping things I want to do here. So if you have any suggestions, let me know and we can sort of build and work through them. I did want to show quickly, because as part of the conference talk, I do just want to show the very simple bits of getting a user's location. And then for the actual mapping, there's a few different options you have with NativeScript. Obviously with NativeScript, you have native APIs, so you could do just about anything. But Mapbox and Google Maps are probably the two primary ways that people build maps with NativeScript. And I'm going to experiment with Mapbox here today just because I've already got an account set up with that and sort of some of the basic setup done. Google Maps is actually interesting. I had always thought, historically, I'd shied away from Google Maps because their pricing was, at least in my opinion, pretty outrageous. But I looked at it today for the first time in quite a while, and it actually looks like it's quite a bit more reasonable now than it used to be. So I don't know if anybody has experience with that, but we might play around with that as well. But I do want to start with Mapbox because I know the Mapbox API is pretty simple and easy to use, and their pricing is also, I know is very reasonable for small and simple applications. The question in the chat, apps that can easily be customized through plugins. If you want to create normal CRUD apps, you can choose any framework which are currently in the market. Yeah, generally speaking, when people say like why NativeScript, these are the sort of examples I like to point to, these sort of APIs that can make your app stand out and make them quite powerful. And so let's just start so this is the app. If you missed it earlier, this is a demo app that I'm building for a conference that I'm speaking at in a couple of weeks, DevReach in Bulgaria. And the maps and geolocation is going to be one component of this. And like I said, I don't have too much of a plan for this, so if you have any suggestions, let me know. But I did want to show some of the real basics before we sort of just start to get a little bit creative here. So I've already installed, to save a little bit of time, both the geolocation plugin and also the Mapbox plugin. And so the first thing I want to show is the world's simplest example in NativeScript to get the user's location. So I've got the geolocation plugin imported. And the first thing you got to do when working with location at all is to actually get the user's request the permissions to do so. And so normally you do this as like a then catch situation. So you'd say then, oh, is it even a catch? I can't even remember. We'll just do this first. So you'd enable the location request, which is going to work fine on this simulator. And when you get it, you can also, I don't even know what this is, but get the user's current location. And get the current location. All right, it might even also be, oh, I know what it wants. You got to provide, some of these things are interesting. I don't know if people have played around with this because I've only used the geolocation plugin for the world's simplest thing, because you can really get into, for example, background geolocation. So if you're building an app, for example, that needs to track the user's location in the background and sort of like maybe send push notifications, sort of like a geofencing type situation, that's something you can do. It's not something I've really played around with. I know that the NativeScript plugin specifically, and I don't know why it wants this, but it needs to know the desired accuracy you want. And I don't know if that's a battery thing or what it is. But let's see. I'm screwing up some syntax here. So if I get the current location, I think I killed I don't need this set, so close this then. We got to close this. I'm screwing something up, so let's back up a little bit. So if I do this, it fixes it. So if I enable the location request, and then we will get the current location, and this is where it wants the accuracy. Hi. Great. And then, yeah, I don't know what I typed earlier, but then we get the location and we can alert it. And when this syncs, so I've got this app running on the terminal. And so built into the plugin, it's got a way to request the user's permission. And so I'm going to allow this app to get the location. And the iOS simulator has sort of baked into it that you are in Cupertino, California. And so these are the information you get back from here. Some of this stuff is interesting that I haven't played around with that I might try to sometime. It could be a lot of fun to sort of periodically ping and get the user's sort of speed, or altitude's another interesting one that might be a lot of fun to experiment with. And these things are available both on iOS and Android, so it could be a lot of fun and interesting to play with. But this is sort of like the hello world of getting a user's location. You enable the request. If you get it, then you can get the current location, and then you have this metadata sort of here to deal with. And in a real world app, you'd also put a catch here, because I guess you wouldn't necessarily need to. If you're enabling the user's location, lots of times you'll see this, like maybe you're in like Yelp, for example, and you request the user's location. If they deny it, well, you don't necessarily even need a catch handler. You might want to show some sort of alternative UI, but you might not either. You could just let this go and just have the user manually type in the location that they want to search from. So you could leave this out as well. So this is your NativeScript, the world's simplest example of how to actually get the user's location. But the thing I want to experiment with a little bit here today is maps. And so I mentioned that I want to use the Mapbox plugin to do this. And Mapbox is, if you haven't used it before, it's a pretty common service. Like I said, the free tier is quite generous. So if you're using it in a smaller application, you should be fine. And in the past, I've found too that as you scale up too, it can be a little more reasonable than Google Maps. So I'm going to try playing with that. If you have any experience with any of these mapping providers, let me know in the comments as well, because a lot of the apps I tend to build are these sort of silly demos. It's been a long time since I've built something at a super big scale, especially with maps. So I don't have a ton of experience when it comes to sort of the business end of these things. But let's have some fun. So I'm going to kill this the simple geolocation code. And I scaffolded just a little bit of stuff to get us started so that I wouldn't have to remember how to hard code all this stuff. When you're using Mapbox, the Mapbox plugin, and I can bring that up. So the Mapbox plugin over here, it's by Eddie, so it's really good stuff. And it's pretty simple. You install the plugin with TNS plugin add. You need a separate permission on Android in order to use this. And essentially the way it works is you get this UI element that you place in your markup that's going to show a native application. And then if I scroll down a little bit more, and we're going to play with this in a minute, so I'm going to keep this up. But you have a whole bunch of APIs that you can use to sort of play around with the map. And so these are the sort of things I want to play with today and try to make a somewhat compelling demo. The polygons are one of the things I want to play with and see what we can mess around with and what we can do. So first, let's just get a map to show on the screen. And I think what we'll do, so let's see. Let's just go ahead and save this with a map in place. And I think we should have a map that shows up. And by default, I have no idea what the default latitude and longitude are. Since the default for, let's see, what's Cupertino? See if we can get some latitude and longitude numbers for Cupertino, because that's where our simulator is going to be by default. So latitude would be 37. Just put in these numbers verbatim and see what it gets us. We can also play with the zoom a little bit. And actually, I think west is considered negative, maybe? We can zoom out to make sure we've got the right spot. So we got our map. Yep, so there's Cupertino. And I think... So I've got show user's location. It did not prompt me for that. So we'll play with that a little bit. Simulating two finger gestures on the... Oh, there we go. So actually, where does Apple think that we are? It's my... Playing around with this, the simulator gestures is always a little bit of fun because you need to hold down the option key, and I could never get it quite right. But interestingly, Apple thinks we are in San Francisco, so I think there's a way on the Mapbox API somewhere down here to actually get the user's location. So I might get that to help set the starting point. Get current... is it user location? So show user location, get user location. So if we put this in, so Mapbox also gives you this map ready callback. And if I use this, we should be able to get, I'm just gonna alert this. And we'll get where the user currently is. The map so that we can set our starting point to be there. There's probably an API here too, so that you don't have to provide a latitude and longitude, you just set it to where the user is. So if I discover that, we can always clean up this code a little bit later. So 406417. Let's try zooming out a little bit as well. All right, so this is where Apple thinks we are. And since we have that, let's kill this. And we can zoom in a little bit now that we're centered. Never looked where, so apparently if we are, let's zoom way in. Where exactly does the simulator think that we are? So we are near the Four Seasons Hotel in San Francisco, according to Apple. That's our simulator's location. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And so again, if you're just joining, the idea here is this is going to be a demo for a conference talk where I'm showing a little bit of what you can do with maps and geolocation in NativeScript. And so I've got this basic setup up, which is what I was going for. I wanted to show how to start with the user's current location, which is what we have here. And the next thing I want to do is I want to give myself some options for things to do with this map. And so I want to add, I don't know, some sort of buttons on the screen or something that's going to allow me to just kick off some additional functionality. And we're going to try to play around with the map APIs and see what else we can do. So let's do that. And the way this should work, and so we have this grid layout that's going to take up the entirety of the page, or at least the entirety of the page below the action bar. And right now the map is sitting on top of it. But the way it should work is if I put something else here, let's just start really simple. So if I put something else in the grid, let's say, let's just put some nonsense here. I should see this somewhere on the screen. So the map took it over. So what I might do is say, I probably could overlay them, but I'm going to keep things simple for now. Because I want some area of the screen to put some controls here that I can use to affect the map in some way. And I'll probably keep them on the top just to keep things simple. And eventually I'll want to style this so it doesn't look absolutely awful, but for now I'm not too worried about this. And let's see. So what do we want to do first? So basically what I want to do is I want this demo to show both pragmatic things and also a bit of silly things as well. So to me, the most pragmatic thing, or if I were using a map in an app, the most common thing I'd want to do is show markers, probably, because I'm thinking like this is an app for maybe like a restaurant chain or like to-go things, and you want to show what locations are available. And so let's try adding some markers. And apparently you can do things like icons, and so we might play with that. So let's just grab this. And what do we want to do? So I guess let's just make a button. Add markers. Don't really care too much what this button looks like for the moment. And when the user taps this, we'll add markers. I don't even think I need anything special, so... Oh, that button's really big. So let's I don't even know what I want to do because I'm trying to make this smaller so that I'm going to fit a bunch of these, and maybe I should be using a separate UI element, but for now that's good enough. I'll work on cleaning up the specifics of this later, because what I really want this to do is say, all right, so let's clear some space up here. So I'm going to add markers. And this is the code that I sort of copied and pasted over from the README. And let's see. So I need to get this Mapbox marker control from NativeScript Mapbox so that I have the marker API. And let's see what this does here. So Mapbox add marker, first marker, more markers, which is interesting. So we're in San Francisco here. I don't know, Treasure Island? Let's see if we can get island. We'll see if this actually works. All right, looks like Google's here to try to help me out. So let's see if I try to title this. So we'll say this is Treasure Island, and you can find treasure here. There we go. Don't have any icons for now, so let's kill this. Selected. Call it immediately when the marker is added. I don't know what this means. Let's just comment that out for now. On tap, sure, we can just leave that for now. I'm gonna need to get the map somewhere here. Let's store the map. So map view API. We'll store this here, and then this map. So on map ready, we'll store a link out to the map, and actually we'll call this Mapbox because all the examples on the README do this as well. So we'll store Mapbox here, and so let's see. We've got our first marker. It's going to be a Mapbox marker. I need to get the Treasure Island. Can be. Oh, Eddie's got a typo here that we'll have to clean up. So let's see. We got our markers, and the latitude is 37.8236. The longitude is 122.3706. And this will have to be this dot. And don't know how to use this API yet, but that should work well enough. And let's see if this actually works. So I'll save this. And so when I click markers, oh, there we go. Treasure Island has been labeled. Okay, so I see. So the on tap. Let me just click off this real quick. Maybe I have to do this. So on tap, I see this, and then I can additionally click on the callouts if I wanted more information. So actually, for demo, I think this is probably both. This is worth including both. So in ID, let's see. So I don't know if I want to remove markers. That's probably unnecessary for the demo because it's pretty trivial functionality. But the rest of this stuff, I have to change these to double quotes for OCD purposes. I am curious what selected does. So if I set this to true, does it put it on by default? Okay, so it opens it by default. So I don't want that because I want to show the tap and call out information. And then the logs in the alert is fine. That actually helps show this. So I have one marker. I want at least one more, maybe two more. So what else is worth? What else is worth? Alcatraz is definitely worth highlighting. So let's see. Put in at least one more of these before we move on to the next feature. I probably spelled that wrong. Google knows though. So we got Alcatraz. So let's see. 2 markers is probably sufficient for a demo, but I do want to figure out this API where I have to pass multiple markers. So we'll just call this thing second. And does it let me do this? If I just before I put in the right ones, if I just do this, I wonder if it works. So markers. Yeah, so that's easy enough. You just pass an array of these. So let's just clean this up. And so this isn't Treasure Island. This is Alcatraz Island. What's the there's got to be a good jail or prison emoji that I can use. Maybe not. Oh, police officer. There we go. We'll see if that actually displays right. So Alcatraz Island. I don't know what a subtitle would be. We can just we could be super clever. And then let's see, did I get I didn't put in the proper, let's see, 37.8270, 122.4230. So now when I say markers, and we go here, we should have one for Treasure Island and one for Alcatraz as well. So this one, I like having this example. Like I said, this is probably the most pragmatic thing that I think most people do with maps. So for the purposes of a conference demo, I think it's a good thing to show right away because, like I said, I think it's the sort of thing your average app could actually use. But we can move on from there to have a little bit of fun. So if you have any suggestions for other map features you'd like to see or things that you think would make for a really fun demo, let me know. But if we don't, there's some things like, for example, animate, tilt. Tilt would be interesting. We could start this up on Android. Track user. I do want to get to polygons, but I'm probably we're going to do one more before that. Polylines, we could start to draw on this. Offline maps is hard to show in a demo. Let me scroll a little bit. So I think some of this, the camera stuff, would probably be the next things to mess with, or maybe styles. So we did markers. We got some markers on there. Viewport, set center, set zoom. The zoom doesn't make a ton of sense. Let's try this. I haven't messed with animate camera before. Let's animate. So let's go back to our app. And really don't like the look of this this button, but I'll play with it later. Is it orientation? orientation. We want these to be horizontal buttons. Spacing's all screwed up, but whatever. It's not the point right now. So we will animate, and we'll set up a new event handler to animate the camera. And let's go down here. Animate camera. So I think this use case here would be like a user searches for something. Google Maps does this. Like if you're on Google Maps and you're looking at the map and you type in, oh, I want to see Detroit, Michigan. Well, Google doesn't just magically show Detroit, Michigan. If you're near Detroit, Michigan, they show like a nice little animation. It's sort of contextual because it shows here's where you are and here's where Detroit is in relation to that. So it's also a fairly useful API. And let's just actually, so I'm just going to start by straight up copying what the documentation has just to see what it does. So apparently this is Eddie's plugin. Eddie is from the Netherlands, so of course he would pick Amsterdam Central Station. And so let's try this. So let's animate. And interesting. So the tilt actually appears to work here because we're showing this at a little bit of an angle. But that animation was honestly pretty horrible because I think it's because of the distance we're animating to. So my guess is that if you were doing this in a real app, you'd probably have to actually calculate the distance between these coordinates to decide what you want to do, or maybe even the zoom level, because really that looked kind of awful. But let's see if we pick. So if we go back, let's just do this to refresh the app's display. So if we wanted to pick something near San Francisco, so I think I actually have to change something in the code itself for it to recognize the change. So if we're in San Francisco and we wanted to go, I don't know. My California geography is horrible. We could pick like Los Angeles just to keep this like, that's a little bit of a distance to travel, but it's not like traveling from San Francisco to to Amsterdam. So let's say the latitude's the main thing that's changing here. So if we're now going down to 118.2437, and we'll play with some of these other settings here in a minute. But so now if I'm in San Francisco, let's say we're in a travel booking app and the user says, actually, I want to see things near LA. So you do this and oh man. So that's interesting. So that was an animation from San Francisco to LA City Hall there. I wonder if the zoom level, like if we kill this, if that, because it looks like it's zooming in, and that zoom in animation is, I think, what's making this look so bad. So what happens if we... Also interesting, too, that iOS will actually take an altitude reading, which just seems wild to me. So if I just omit everything, if I want to keep this with the defaults, and I animate this, and it really is. So that's, the default is 10 seconds. Let's make this not 10 seconds. So what if we did that same thing over 3 seconds? So San Francisco to LA. Weird too that the user's location seems to dip a bit. Let's see. Where's my, let's go to a map of California. Where's somewhere I can animate to that's a little bit closer. San Jose, Sacramento. Let's get latitude and longitude of San Jose. So we're going to some place that's a little bit closer. So we'll say 37.382. And we'll go to a longitude of 121.863. Because, like I said, in a real world sort of application, you'd probably want to do some math for things like duration and zoom level so that this animation felt smooth. Because see, when you're going this short, that even felt a little bit slow. Like we could probably do this in like a second and a half and for it to feel reasonable. And I think the Mapbox API actually has like a way of there's some API here for actually getting the distance. Actually, it might be in the Geolocation plugin for getting the distance between two coordinates. Let me check here in a second. Yeah, I think it's so if we did geolocation dot calculate the distance between two locations. So basically what you would probably do is you would say geolocation.distance and you'd pass it the place that the user wants to go to and also the user's current location, which you can get through the geolocation plugin or through Mapbox. And you'd have to do some math to figure out exactly how long you want the duration to take so that this looks natural. But I think for like that sort of distance, that looks pretty nice, and it's a nice little touch that you can add for your app. And it'd look a little bit nicer on device 2 versus this simulator. But we can kill this for now. So that's demo number 2. So we've got, like I said, I like to show pragmatic stuff in my demos, but also a little bit of fun. And I think this stuff right now is fairly pragmatic. So if I didn't, I think I got to make a change that actually alters something to actually get a refresh so we can review where we're at. So I'll change the ID of this. And so right now we've got a plugin. I can add markers to this thing. I can animate it to change distance. So I think that's pretty common requirements of a whole lot of apps. And so if we added a third feature, there's actually 2 other features I'm thinking about working with. One is there is a directions plugin in here. So Eddie also has a directions plugin. And so what I was thinking about doing is integrating this into the maps demo as well. So we might try that. And then the other thing I want to do is back on the Mapbox plugin, I want to add with these polygons. And this one, to be honest with you, I only want to do this just because I think it's a lot of fun to be able to draw on a map. And I do think there's some actual potential uses for this. Like if you wanted to show someone, you had an app where you wanted to demarc a certain region, like say, for whatever reason, or show some sort of a barrier, you can use these APIs to actually draw lines, put them down so that the users can actually see them within the app. So there is some use for this, but I think it's a lot less useful than just say working with like markers and these sort of animations. And okay, so those are the 2 things I want to cover. And let's actually, I sort of feel like trying out this directions plugin because I've known about this thing for a while. Eddie's had this for a while, and I've never actually tried this out. And so let's just see what happens. And so I have to install this thing. So let's do that. NativeScript directions. And I don't think there are any other, doesn't seem to be any other like setup sort of directions. So when this is installed, we can go ahead and run it so we get this out here. And really what I want to do is set this so that, let me clean up some of these comments. So like the OCD in me doesn't like these extra comments lying around. And what I want to do is change these markers so that essentially when you tap on them, let's actually just start to change this now. Instead of just alerting, which I'll keep this code here for now just so we have it. Instead of alerting, we actually show the user directions here. So they see Treasure Island, they want to actually go to Treasure Island, and we will show them here how to do that. So let's see, our installation probably finished. So if we go over here, nope, it's still pushing it out. There we go. So we have the directions plugin. And looking here, it's a little more screen real estate at the API. Let's see. So we have TypeScript. So we will get into the directions. And I'm also OCD about alphabetical order. I don't know if other people have this problem, but I like my imports to stay in alphabetical order. But I have the directions plugin, and let's go in and say, all right, so directions, if directions are available. So not all devices have the Maps app installed. Most do, but if you have an Android simulator, you might be out of luck. So in a real world example, you'd want to make sure directions are available before you offer them, just to avoid crashes and such. But since this is a demo, we can basically skip this step. And this is really what we're looking for. So let's do that. So when the user does this, let's see, we want to do directions. Actually, do I have to say, oh yeah, I do. So I'm going to need directions, and then ng-init. Actually, I think the constructor is probably the proper place to do this, not that it'll matter a whole lot. So we'll create a new directions instance and clean this up a little bit. And then we have this directions instance, and like I said, I have the markers, and so I have to do this dot directions dot navigate, and let's actually just copy and paste this in. So this is fairly verbose, but that's all right. So let's just see if this works. So this is Eddie's plugin. So of course he's having us go to the Netherlands again. I don't know what sort of directions we're going to get to the Netherlands, but let's add some markers. And I see Treasure Island, and I definitely want to go to Treasure Island. So let's do that. And yeah, there we go. Maps. Sure, Maps can have my... So it got the right location, and it just wants us to do this. I wonder, so, all right. So this looks like it worked. So let's go... Man. Doing this on the Pros, or on the iPhone 10 Pluses on the simulator, grabbing that is a bit of a pain. So we've got Treasure Island, and so instead of going to, let's see, what does the directions API want? Default is current location. So from, we could set up, oh, let's see, the default would be, default is current location, which is what we'd want actually. So we actually we shouldn't need from, because we want to navigate from the user's current location in this case. And then the 2 would be, let's just see, I don't know how specific Apple's going to want us to be, but let's just say Cisco. For for Iowa specific option C. And then I don't care about this for a demo because I want to keep, for demos, I like to keep the code as simple as possible. So I want to get rid of all this clutter, and I might sort of abstract some of this out later as well. So we're going to navigate, and let's just see what happens, and then we might have to check the docs to get this to work. All right, so we're going to add our markers, and then Treasure Island. And what happens if I want to go to Treasure Island? Yeah, there we go. So this is that default location that's hard-coded into the iOS simulator. That's where we're starting. And apparently you take the Bay Bridge to get to Treasure Island. And maybe just for completeness, if we take... I'm curious what the directions are going to be to Alcatraz. So if we take Alcatraz and we say we want to allow the user to navigate there, we got to head back to our app and place our markers down and go to Alcatraz. What is Apple going to tell us to do? Oh, it's actually quite good. Walking required to reach destination, ferry required. So kind of helpful. And then the plugin is set up by default. It's going to launch Google Maps over on Android. I'll probably launch this app up on Android before we finish up today, so you can just see that all of this is cross-platform as well. And yeah, that works surprisingly well. That actually worked easier and better than I thought it would. So, all right. So I said 4 demos. We've got markers, we've got animation, we've got directions. And the last thing I want to play with, and this should be a little bit of fun, is, let's see, I don't want directions anymore. I want to go back to, let's Marketplace. We'll head back to Mapbox. And I want to play with this ability to draw polygons. Somewhere down here it is. Come on. Polygon. Add polygons. So draw a shape. Connect the dots. And Eddie specifically has a comment on here. The first person to draw a snowman drawn with this function gets a t-shirt. And so we might have to try this. But to start, let's just see what happens. So probably the fun part about this is getting the latitude and longitude correct. That's probably going to be the most fun that we're going to have. But like I said, let's just start. So there's an extra character hanging out there. So let's just create a button called Draw. And we'll draw and head in here. And we'll put it down here as a third function. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy and paste this code over. So come on. So I'm just copying that over, pasting this in here. We'll format it. And so after reading this, scroll to Amsterdam. I guess I could scroll to Amsterdam if I set the starting location. So yeah, so for testing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my animation to, instead of animating there, let's animate to Amsterdam, just because I want to see what Eddie's demo does by default. And I need to fix this too. Is this a Go Visual Studio Code? Oh, but it didn't put it in alphabetical order. That's not very cool. Oh, no. Color. Okay. So we've got colors, and I said we're going to animate to Amsterdam. So it looks like latitude of like, let's see, 52.36 should get us close enough. And the longitude of 4.92, sure. Yep, All right. And then draw, all that should be set up to work. And so let's see what happens. So I say draw, and then we're going to animate our way over to Amsterdam. And so sure enough, Eddie's demo is a remarkable red box over Amsterdam, which is very amazing. All right, so what I want to do is change this, and we're going to go to San Francisco. So because I don't want to do this based off Amsterdam, which I'm very sorry, Eddie, but we're going to go back to San Francisco just because it's the default iOS simulator location. And all right, do some math with these points and then try to figure out what these APIs do. So we already did this. I'm going to get rid of this comment. So the ID is optional. I'm not going to remove this. I just want to clean up. At the moment, I don't care about troubleshooting just because I want to keep this example. Stroke-related properties are only effective on iOS. So it's probably a good comment to keep in there. So fill color, fill opacity. So let's see. So we're drawing a box, and there's these 4 points here. So we'll just try to move all these as a first step. So we know we are in San Francisco. So those points are going to be somewhere around here. So, God, the math in this could easily, I could spend an hour just drawing with these things. So, all right, I guess the only way to do this is to start. So he's got 5 points. How is this 5? 1, 2. Because I totally only see 4 points. That is interesting. So these numbers, are they going? I don't know. You don't learn until you try, right? So let's comment these out. The points, yeah, through to here. Unless I totally screwed that up. Yeah, I screwed something up. So let's back up a bit. Okay, this is the part I want to comment out because I want this as a reference. Oh, it's probably just complaining because it wants me to actually provide the array. All right, so we got an array, and I guess let's just do this. So let's see, Latin long, and let's do like 4 of these things. What? Why not? Let's say 2, 3, 4. And all right, so I guess actually I should have just copied and pasted with these numbers in and then played with them. So 37 point and a longitude of 122.4230. All right, so we've got that. Yeah, let's copy and paste this over a few times. Yeah. I'm trying to just make a square. So let's see. So if our first one is here, then in theory, so we're switching the longitude. So we'd want to bump this a little bit. So if we just said, let's just cut off some numbers here to try to restore some sanity to this. And we'll also just, oh, what the heck. If I'm going to successfully draw this at all, I'm going to do this. So let's see, if we made it, we bump over the longitude for the first one, and then you bump over the longitude because you want to go right. So for the second one, you still want to be over to the right, but you want to be down, right? Because we're going down and over. And then you move back the longitude to 4. Let's just save this and see what happens. So I managed to draw whatever the heck this is, but at least I'm in the right general vicinity. So I guess that's progress. So let's see. So I've got latitude and longitude. I almost might need to write some functions to make these things actually like human readable, because otherwise my brain is not cool with this. So for my starting point, I change the let's see, I want to change only if I'm moving this way. I would keep the latitude the same, but I'd bump over. So actually, let's start at 4. All right, start at 3 and move. Well, start at 4 and move to 3, and the latitude stays the same. So in theory, if I know what I'm doing in any sort of way, I move down, and then for the next one, I'd want to be over. So I'd want to still be down, but I want my latitude to change over to 37, and then this. So did I draw a box, or do I have any idea what I'm doing? Oh, that's right. I have to say draw. So I should make that automatic. Yes. All right. So I successfully drew a box mostly over San Francisco. I guess that's close enough. I guess too. So Eddie's got 5 points here. And okay, the bottom one's the same as the first one, I think. So if I take this, is my box going to look correct? So we'll say draw. Okay, so that completed the box. Now, it's a bit of an oblong box. I wonder if that's because of like curvature of the Earth, that this is wider than this, but I guess it doesn't matter too much. I do want to move this box a little bit because I'm centered here over San Francisco. So ideally my box would also be centered over San Francisco. So let's see. So that means I need to make the longitude more negative. So if I bump all of these numbers up 1, and I'm probably going to say when the map's ready, I'm just going to, for now, hard code a draw so that I don't have to hit that button every time I mess with this. All right, so that's closer. That actually went too far, so I'm probably going to have to get into the in-betweens, which I didn't want to do, but let's see, this will become 4, 5, 3, 5. I don't want to screw this up, so let's do this. So these will become 4, 5, oops, and which means these will become 3, 5. So we should see our box move over just a bit. That's perfect. And then I need to bump, let's see, the latitude needs to become more north, just a little bit also. So I think that might work. This doesn't need to be perfect. I just wanted to show up on the screen. So good enough. And in fact, that actually encompasses where the two markers are. So that works well enough. So I have a box, and that's actually a little bit better than I anticipated getting to. I don't know if there's any other of these APIs that we really want to play with. So let's see. You can do like stroke opacity. If this were in a real world app, I probably wouldn't go with red and green. I might say like, instead of green, I think I'd probably do like a gray. And instead of red, I don't know what I might do. Like I might try making something up. I don't even know if this is a thing that the color API is going to recognize, but like a light blue. It looks a little bit better. It's not so quite obnoxious. And like stroke width. That gray doesn't have to be super obnoxious. So this gives you an idea of what you can do. And really, I think for the purposes of the demo, this is probably sufficient. If if I had a little more time, we could have a little bit of fun in here. Like it might be fun to try to draw, like you can do polygons, but you can also just do like straight up lines. At least I believe you can. Get center is the viewpoint. Maybe if you just did like a polygon with two shapes. Oh yeah, there you go. Polyline, so connect the points given as parameters. So basically you could set this up so you just draw lines. So I could draw like NativeScript over here, or if anybody has any other ideas of like, there's probably some fun you could have in here for the purposes of a demo. Like it's always fun if you can make things a little more interesting rather than showing something that's kind of, I guess, kind of interesting, but ultimately a little bit boring in terms of just a simple box. So really, I guess the only other thing I wanted to do is make sure all of this runs on Android. So I'm going to head over here, and we'll just kick this over on Android to make sure everything still works. But while that's running, just to quickly review what we've really covered here. So we took a look at a few different plugins on the NativeScript Marketplace. We looked at the Geolocation plugin early on. So how to find your location in NativeScript, how to grab that. We also looked at the Mapbox plugin. So Mapbox is a pretty popular map provider that we have really good support for in NativeScript. I do want to look at Google Maps. I might cover that in a future stream. Yes, the comments, develop a NativeScript meetup locations app. Yeah, exactly. So you could totally use these sort of APIs for doing that and marking different locations on a map. So this is one I might cover in a future stream, especially if there's interest in that sort of thing. And for the most part, we played with Mapbox, and we came up with a way of adding markers to this, directions. So if we click on this, we can actually get directions using the sort of native map provider. We animated, so I can use this to add like a little animation if the user's, say, like searching for something. And we also have a way of drawing like those boxes on a screen. And so if this works on Android, if you have any other questions from anything I've covered, let me know, because after this, we're going to start to wrap up. And yeah, so there you go. As you can see, everything with this plugin is really cross-platform friendly. So I've got my box that I drew there. I should be able, there's my markers. So I can add markers, Alcatraz and Treasure Island. I can animate. Actually, that animation looked way nicer on Android. I kind of want to do that again. So if we just make some hard-coded change. Yeah, see, it does like a little zoom out. I might have to check with Eddie to see why that only happens on Android, because that looks a whole lot nicer. And the last thing I wanted to check is I'm just curious if there's a native mapping thing installed in this simulator. So Treasure Island. Oh yeah, so Google Maps. We don't need to sign in Google. That's okay. And we'll see how Google thinks that. Yeah, so Google puts us by default in Mountain View, so it's still taking us to Treasure Island, but it's having us go through there. I didn't even know this was a feature of Google Maps. Jam through the traffic jam. Listen to music on Google Maps. I've never seen this UI before, but that's fascinating that they would integrate that. All right. But anyways, all right. So I don't see any other questions. So hopefully you found this interesting. If you're curious, all this code, I'm going to push it to, I have a GitHub repo that I could bring up here that I'm building for the conference. So it's TJ Van Tol on GitHub, and it's top 10. Right now, there's not much documentation on this because I'm still sort of building this out. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're in Europe, if you're interested, conference we run called DevReach that I'm going to be at in 2 weeks, where I'm going to be presenting this and a lot more about NativeScript. So if you're interested in that at all, come and check it out. But other than that, thanks everybody for joining today, and have a good one.